This mini lesson is about randomization. Click on the link to watch this short video. It gives a really nice overview of randomization. All right, so that video gave you a good big picture, and I'm just going to talk a little bit more about randomization. So randomization is used in experimental designs, and the purpose of it is really to make it more likely that the differences that you see between two groups can be attributed to the treatment or experimental manipulation rather than something else. And so randomization is a way to increase the strength of the study design or the internal validity. And it's seen as one of the strongest designs in intervention studies often. And then it prevents biases, so experimenters might unintentionally assign participants to a certain group if they don't use random sampling. And then ultimately, if you're using this randomization process, it makes it more likely that groups should be similar by using this random sampling method. So theoretically, the different characteristics should kind of end up equal across the two different groups or three different groups, how many of you are doing. But it's not a guarantee, and one of my stats teachers used to say bad random samples happen, and so just keep that in mind when you're thinking about randomization. All right, so now we're going to talk about a few different types of randomization or different randomization strategies that might be used and that you might see in the studies. First is simple randomization, and that's just when the randomization happens at the same time for all participants. And so you wait till you recruit all participants in the study, and then you do something like flipping a coin or using a random number generator to figure out which group each participant is going to go in. The next type is a blocked design, and that's when participants are put into blocks of some size that's determined ahead of time, so 4 participants, 10 participants, whatever it is, and then the participants are randomized within those blocks. And that's commonly used if there's kind of different segments of a group, if you're going to have a rolling enrollment and that you don't want to wait until the end to get all of your subjects to randomize. You want to randomize along the way. And then the final type of randomization is stratified, and that's when participants are broken into groups on some type of characteristic and then randomized within those stratified groups. And so you might see that done with age groups or gender, maybe the location. So if they're at different sites, you might randomize at the different sites to make sure you have kind of equal numbers from each site randomized. And that's pretty common to see as well. Here are some issues that you might see related to randomization or random assignment. The first is maybe there's a study where they're unable to randomize, and that could be a situation where it's unethical or unreasonable to pick the type of treatment for the participant. There's also situations that come up in my research commonly, so in schools, where you can't randomize children into a classroom or a school. And so the workaround to that is that you see them randomized at the school or classroom level, which is going to take a much bigger sample size. Another issue is broken randomization, and so that could happen if people are non-compliant with treatment assignment, so they get assigned to a group but they don't complete the treatment because maybe the side effects are too difficult to deal with or something like that. And a solution that you might see in studies related to that is called an intent to treat model. And so if you see that, that's just a way of them dealing with broken randomization, of the statisticians dealing with broken randomization. And then finally, related to the level of blinding in studies. And so blinding is really talking about people not knowing what the group assignment is. And you can see single blind studies where the participants aren't sure if they're in the treatment or control group. You can see double blind studies where the experimenters and the participants aren't aware who's in the treatment or control group. And then finally, which I don't see a lot of these, but I guess they exist, is triple blind studies, where it's the participants, the experimenters, and the statisticians who are actually doing the analyses that are all blind to which group is treatment and which group is control. So when you're reading your articles for your review, some of the things that you might look at related to randomization is just look for a description of the randomization in experimental designs and the process that they went through for randomization. You might see descriptions of if it was simple or stratified, those types. There's also another design called matched design, where the participants are matched across groups. That's not as strong as randomization, but it's still something that you may see in the literature. Another thing to look for is comparisons about of the randomized groups at pretest. That's not necessary. Theoretically, randomized groups will kind of make those differences equal across groups, but lots of studies still have pretest, and they may compare to see how similar or different the groups are at pretest to kind of confirm that the randomization works. And then finally, just as you're reading the studies, pay attention to who knows about the randomization. So lots of times the participants may be aware of what group they're in, especially in these behavioral studies. They're going to be aware of the treatment that they're getting. But are the assessors who are completing maybe the assessments at the end of the intervention blind to which group the participants are in? And so just think about those things as you're reading your articles, and it'll help you to draw some conclusions about the quality of the article and how you can consider it in your literature review.